Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for 14 years, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen on that Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. A father was about to say something during a simple survey question that would lead to Steve completely abandoning the game, breaking every rule of television production, and creating the most watched moment in Family Feud history. It started when Robert Mitchell, a 56-year-old mechanic from Columbus, Ohio, was asked to name something that keeps you awake at night. His answer would change everything. Bob Mitchell stood at the center of his family's lineup, his calloused mechanic's hands gripping the buzzer a little too tightly. At 56, 30 years of working under cars had given him permanent grease stains under his fingernails and a bad back. But it was the past 16 months that had aged him the most. 16 months since his son, Master Sergeant Jake Mitchell, had deployed to Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates with the 380th Air Expeditionary Wing. Next to him stood his wife Diane, 54, a third-grade teacher whose usual warm smile was forced today. Their daughter Ashley, 27, a physical therapist, stood beside her mother, followed by Bob's brother Tom and Diane's sister Jennifer. Steve Harvey strutted onto the stage with his signature style, but those who worked with him regularly noticed he kept glancing at his producer, Marcus Freeman, who was having an unusually intense phone conversation off stage. "Mitchell family, Anderson family, y'all ready to win some money?" Steve called out, his voice booming across the studio. The families cheered, the audience applauded, and they started with a practice question to warm up. But then came the real first round, and the question that would change everything. "Top 6 answers on the board," Steve announced. "Name something that keeps you awake at night." Bob buzzed in first. His answer came out before he could stop himself. "Wondering if my son's aircraft made it back safely from a combat mission." The studio went dead silent. Even Steve Harvey, who'd heard thousands of answers over the years, froze. "I'm sorry," Bob said quickly, his face reddening. "I meant to say worry. Just worry." But Steve caught the look Diane gave her husband, the way Ashley reached over to squeeze her father's shoulder, and he knew there was a story here. They played through the round, with the Mitchells taking control. But during the commercial break, Steve found himself walking over to Bob. "You doing all right, man?" Steve asked, his voice gentle. "You seem like you got something heavy on your mind." Bob tried to smile, but it faltered. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harvey. It's a tough day, trying to stay focused for the family." "What's going on?" Steve asked, genuine concern in his voice. Diane stepped in, her hand on her husband's arm. "Our son Jake is deployed. Air Force. He's been gone 16 months. 16 months, Steve repeated, feeling the weight of those words. "Where's he stationed?" "Al Dhafra Air Base, UAE, Bob replied, his voice thick with emotion. "He's a master sergeant, crew chief, for F-22 Raptors. Been in 12 years, but this deployment, it's been the hardest." "Why this one particularly?" Steve asked. Bob's voice cracked slightly. "He was supposed to come home for 2 weeks in September. Had it all approved. Then some situation happened classified. He couldn't tell us what, and his leave got canceled 2 days before. Haven't seen him since July of last year." "Al Dhafra," Steve repeated, and several veterans in the audience nodded knowingly. "That's a combat zone, isn't it?" "Technically, no," Bob said. "But those jets fly combat missions daily. Operation Inherent Resolve, in Syria and Iraq. Jake's jets provide air support for troops on the ground." "If one of those jets fails because of maintenance..." Bob couldn't finish the sentence. Ashley, their daughter, spoke up. "Dad blames himself for Jake joining. See, Jake grew up in Dad's auto shop. Could rebuild an engine by the time he was 15. Dad taught him everything about machines, and Jake used that knowledge to become one of the best F-22 crew chiefs in the Air Force. But now Dad thinks, I trained him to go to war," Bob finished quietly. "I gave him the skills that took him away from us." Steve was about to respond when his producer, Marcus Freeman, suddenly appeared at the edge of the stage, gesturing frantically. Steve had never seen Marcus look so urgent during a live taping. "Steve," Marcus said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have an urgent call from Al Dhafra Air Base. It's from Colonel James Patterson, commander of the 380th Air Expeditionary Wing." The blood drained from Bob's face. In military families, unexpected calls from commanders meant one of two things: something very bad or something extraordinary. Given what Bob had just shared about the lost F-22, everyone feared the worst. "Oh, God," Diane whispered, grabbing Bob's arm. "Jake." Steve took the phone Marcus handed him, his own heart pounding. The entire studio held its breath. "This is Steve Harvey," he said into the phone, making sure his mic would pick up the conversation. "Mr. Harvey," came a clear, authoritative voice. "This is Colonel James Patterson. I understand you have the family of Master Sergeant Jacob Mitchell there with you?" "Yes, sir, they're right here," Steve replied, watching Bob's family huddle together in fear. "Mr. Harvey, I need to speak directly to Mr. Robert Mitchell about his son." Steve handed the phone to Bob, whose hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. "This is Bob Mitchell," he managed to say. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm calling about your son, Master Sergeant Jake Mitchell. 72 hours ago, during a routine pre-flight inspection at 0300 hours, your son identified a catastrophic failure in one of our F-22 Raptors that was scheduled for a combat mission over Syria. Bob's legs gave out. Tom had to catch him." The colonel continued quickly. "Mr. Mitchell, your son is safe. More than safe, he's a hero. The failure he detected was a microfracture in the aircraft's hydraulic system that was invisible to standard inspections. If that aircraft had attempted its mission, we would have lost both a $143 million aircraft and, more importantly, Major Sarah Thompson, a pilot with 2 young children." Bob was crying now. Relief and pride mixing in his tears. "He saved her? He saved her life, Mr. Mitchell." Major Thompson was scheduled to provide close air support for Special Operations Forces who were pinned down. Your son not only saved her life, but potentially saved the lives of a dozen soldiers on the ground who needed that air support. "We got another aircraft up in time, thanks to your son working 18 straight hours to ensure it was combat ready. That's my boy," Bob said, his voice breaking. "That's my Jake." "Mr. Mitchell," the colonel continued, "I'm not calling just to inform you of your son's heroic actions. I'm calling because the Air Force has made a decision. When did you last see your son?" 16 months ago, sir. July 5th, 2023. "Mr. Mitchell, that's far too long. Due to your son's exceptional service and this life-saving action, he's been selected for immediate rotation and reassignment to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Mr. Mitchell, can you please turn around?" Bob turned slowly, and the entire studio erupted in gasps and then cheers. Walking onto the Family Feud stage in his Air Force dress blues, complete with his Master Sergeant stripes and newly awarded Air Force Commendation Medal, was Jake Mitchell. At 30 years old, Jake was the image of military bearing tall, fit, with his father's strong jaw and his mother's kind eyes. But all that military composure crumbled the moment he saw his father's face. "Dad," Jake said, his voice breaking, "I'm home." Bob made a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and crossed the stage in 3 strides, catching his son in an embrace that spoke of 16 months of missed moments, worried nights, and desperate prayers. Father and son held each other like they were trying to make up for every day they'd been apart. "Jake," Bob kept saying, "Jake, you're here. You're really here." "I'm here, Dad. I'm home," Jake replied, his own tears flowing freely. Diane and Ashley joined them, turning it into a family embrace that had the entire studio in tears. Steve Harvey, who prided himself on maintaining his composure, had to take his glasses off to wipe his eyes. "How?" Bob finally managed, pulling back to look at his son's face, touching it as if to confirm he was real. "The colonel said this just happened 72 hours ago." Jake grinned. The same mischievous smile Bob remembered from when Jake was a kid caught working on the car past bedtime.
Dad, that incident happened 3 weeks ago.
We've been planning this surprise ever since. The Air Force worked with the show to make it happen. 3 weeks? Diane exclaimed. You've known you were coming home for 3 weeks? The longest 3 weeks of my life, Mom, Jake said, hugging her tightly. Every time we talked, I wanted to tell you, especially when you cried about Thanksgiving. Wait, Bob said suddenly. Thanksgiving? You'll be home for Thanksgiving? I'll be home for all of them now, Dad, Jake said. I've been reassigned to Wright-Patterson in Dayton, 2.5 hours from home. My deployment days are done for at least the next 4 years. Bob actually had to sit down on the stage. Tom and Steve both moved to support him. Wright-Patterson? Bob repeated. You'll be in Ohio? I'll be home for Sunday dinners, Jake confirmed. I'll be there to help in the shop on weekends. Dad, we can finally finish the Mustang. The mention of the car they'd built together completely broke Bob's composure. He pulled his son close again, sobbing openly. Ashley jumped on her brother. You jerk! I've been covering for you at Sunday dinners for 16 months. Sorry, Ash, Jake laughed, catching his sister. I'll make it up to you. I brought you something from Dubai. Steve approached the reunited family, giving them a moment before speaking. Master Sergeant Mitchell, welcome home, and thank you for your service. Jake straightened and saluted. Thank you, Mr. Harvey, and thank you for making this possible. Tell us about this save, Steve said. What exactly happened? Jake looked modest. It was a routine pre-flight inspection, Mr. Harvey. I noticed an anomaly in the hydraulic pressure readings. Turned out to be a microscopic crack in a critical line. If that bird had gone up, the pilot would have lost all flight controls at altitude. Just a routine inspection, he says, Bob interjected with pride. That's a $20 million engine he saved, not to mention Captain Richardson's life. You know the pilot? Steve asked. Yes, sir. Jake nodded. She's got 3 kids back in Texas. That's what I thought about when I found that crack. 3 kids who still have their mom because I did my job. Because you did it exceptionally, Bob corrected firmly. Steve turned to the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, we're witnessing something special here. Both families are getting the maximum prize money today. The Anderson family, who had been watching with tears in their own eyes, applauded enthusiastically. The grandmother of their family called out, Welcome home, soldier. Airman, ma'am, Jake corrected with a smile. But thank you. Now, Steve announced, we're going to do something different. Jake, you're going to play fast money with your dad, father and son, together. Jake's face lit up. Really? Dad, you always said if you got on this show. I know what I said. Bob laughed, wiping his eyes. But I didn't expect my son to walk out in the middle of it. As they set up for fast money, Jake leaned close to his father. I watched every episode I could over there, Dad. Made the whole squadron watch with me. Told them my dad was going to be on one day. You watched Family Feud in the UAE? Bob asked, amazed. Every episode we could stream, Jake confirmed, helped feel closer to home, closer to you. Steve had them take their positions, with Bob going first while Jake went to the soundproof booth. But before Jake left, he stopped and looked at his father. Dad, that Mustang, you really haven't started it? Bob shook his head. Couldn't. Not without you. That's our car. Jake's eyes filled with fresh tears. We'll start it together when we get home. In the booth, Steve turned to Bob. You ready for this? Mr. Harvey, Bob said. My son is home. I could fail every question and still be winning. Well, let's try to win some money too, Steve laughed. 20 seconds on the clock. Here we go. Name something a father waits for. Bob's answer was immediate. His son to come home from war. The audience was silent for a moment, the weight of the answer hitting everyone. Name a sound that makes you happy. My kid's voice on the phone. Bob answered without hesitation. Number of months that feel like a lifetime. 16, Bob said firmly. Name something you save. Every letter from deployment, Bob responded. Name something worth celebrating. Homecoming, Bob said, his voice cracking. The buzzer sounded, and the audience erupted in applause. Steve walked over to check the board. You said fathers wait for sons to come home from war, Survey said. The board showed 8 points. That's pretty specific, but 8 people understood. Sound that makes you happy kid's voice on the phone. 22 points. 16 months feels like a lifetime. 3 points. Again, specific, but some people get it. You save letters from deployment. 12 points. And homecoming is worth celebrating. 35 points. That's 80 points, Steve announced. Jake needs 120 for $20,000. That's a lot, but let's see what he can do. They brought Jake out of the booth, and he took his position at the podium. Your dad got 80 points, Steve informed him. You need 120. That's tough, but not impossible. 25 seconds on the clock. Jake nodded, focused like he was preparing for a mission. Steve reminded everyone of Bob's answers, then started the clock. Name something a father waits for. His children's success. Jake answered quickly. Name a sound that makes you happy. Laughter, Jake said. Number of months that feel like a lifetime. 12. Try again, Steve prompted. 1, Jake said quickly. Name something you save. Money, Jake answered. Name something worth celebrating. Family, Jake said, looking directly at his father. The buzzer sounded. The Mitchell family gathered around the board. All right, Steve said. Fathers wait for their children's success, Survey said. 15 points. You need 105 more. Sound that makes you happy. Laughter. 31 points. 74 to go. 12 months wasn't there, but 1 month feels like a lifetime. 18 points. 56 to go. You save money. 62 points. Oh my goodness, it's going to be close. You need 6 points. Family is worth celebrating. For $20,000, Survey said. The board lit up with 42 points. You've won $20,000, Steve announced as both families erupted in celebration. Bob and Jake embraced again, this time in victory, rather than just reunion. Hold on, Steve said, calming everyone down. Jake, you said fathers wait for their children's success. Your dad's been waiting for you. Tell me about your success. Jake looked at his father with deep emotion. My success isn't the medal or the commendation. It's that I became the man my father raised me to be. Every day in the Air Force, I use something my dad taught me. Whether it's diagnosing an engine problem, or leading my team, or just treating people with respect. That all comes from him. Bob was crying again, not even trying to hide it. Mr. Harvey, Jake continued, my dad gave up his dream of expanding his shop to make sure Ashley and I could go to college. He's worked 6 days a week for 30 years. He never missed a baseball game, a school play, nothing. And when I deployed, he wrote me every single week. 103 letters. Over 3 deployments. 103 letters? Steve repeated, amazed. I have every one, Jake confirmed. Some weeks it was just a paragraph about what he fixed at the shop. Other weeks it was 3 pages about the Browns' terrible season. But every letter ended the same way. Stay safe, son. The garage is waiting. Steve turned to Bob. You wrote your son every week? Bob shrugged, embarrassed. It wasn't anything special. Just wanted him to know home was still here. Dad, Jake said, those letters kept me going. There were nights in sandstorms, or after 18-hour shifts, when those letters were the only thing that reminded me why I was there. Steve addressed the cameras. This is what service means, folks. Not just the person in uniform, but the families who wait, who worry, who write letters and keep place settings and leave cars under tarps. He turned back to the family. Jake, what's the first thing you're going to do when you get home? Jake didn't hesitate. Start the Mustang with my dad, then take Mom for a ride, Then probably eat everything in the refrigerator. Diane laughed through her tears. I've already got a grocery list started. Mr. Harvey, Bob said suddenly, can I say something? Of course, Steve replied. Bob faced the cameras, his arm around his son. There are thousands of parents watching who have kids deployed right now. Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, Space Force. Your kids are coming home. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they're coming home. Keep their rooms ready. Keep their place at the table. Keep writing those letters, even when you don't know what to say. He paused, composing himself. And when they do come home, remember they might be different. War changes people. Deployment changes people. But they're still your kids. They still need you. Maybe more than ever. Jake added, and to all the service members watching, whether you're in a barracks in Germany, or a tent in Syria, or on a ship in the Pacific, call home. I know it's hard with time zones and operational security, but call home. Your parents would rather wake up at 3 a.m. to hear your voice than sleep through the night wondering if you're okay. Ashley stepped forward. And to the siblings, we're here too. We're keeping Mom and Dad together while you're gone. We're being strong because someone has to be. But man, we miss you. The studio was completely silent, except for sniffles from the audience. Steve looked at Jake. Master Sergeant Mitchell, what was the hardest part about being deployed? Jake thought for a moment. The helplessness, Mr. Harvey. When my dad had his heart scare last year, it was nothing, Bob interjected quickly. It was a mild heart attack, Dad. Jake corrected gently. And I was 7,000 miles away. Couldn't do anything except wait for updates from Ashley. That was the worst night of my deployment. And you didn't tell me that, Bob said, looking at his son. What was I going to say, Dad? That I almost went AWOL to come home? My commander actually had to talk me down. Reminded me that you'd never forgive me if I threw away my career over something you were already recovering from. He was right, Bob said firmly, then softer. But I'm glad you wanted to come. Steve had to take a moment to compose himself. Folks, this is real life. This is what military families go through every single day. Marcus Freeman approached the stage again. Steve, I just got off the phone with Wright Patterson. Jake, your commanding officer there wants you to know that your household goods from the UAE are being expedited. And Mr. Mitchell Bob, they want to invite you to Jake's formal arrival ceremony next month. Full honors. Bob looked stunned. I can come on base? Dad, Jake said, they want you to see what your son does. The jets I work on, the people I serve with, they want to thank the man who raised an airman. Also, Marcus continued, our airline sponsor wants to fly Jake's entire squadron from Al Dhafra here for Christmas. 12 airmen who've been deployed with Jake, all expenses paid, including hotels for their families, to meet them here. Jake's military composure finally cracked completely. My whole squadron? You're bringing Eagle Squadron home for Christmas? Every one of them, Marcus confirmed. They're already being notified. Jake had to sit down on the stage floor. Overwhelmed. Those guys. Some of them haven't been home in 2 years. Martinez has a baby. He's never met. Thompson got married over video call. You're bringing them all home? For 10 days, Marcus said. Full holiday leave, courtesy of Family Feud and our sponsors. Bob dropped down next to his son, pulling him close. This is incredible. Jake? Your whole unit? They're my brothers, Dad, Jake said through tears. We've been through everything together. Sandstorms, rocket attacks, 120-degree heat. And now, they all get to come home. Steve addressed the cameras again. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing is the brotherhood, the sisterhood of military service. These people don't just serve together. They become family. He turned to Jake. Tell us about your squadron. Jake wiped his eyes and stood. helping his father up. The finest people I've ever served with. Staff Sergeant Martinez, who sends half his pay home to support his parents in El Paso. Technical Sergeant Thompson, who married his high school sweetheart over a laptop because he couldn't get leave. Senior Airman Williams, who's 19 years old and maintains jets worth more than most cities' budgets. They serve without complaint, without recognition, 12 to 18-hour shifts in brutal heat, because that's what integrity looks like. And they'll all be home for Christmas, Steve reminded him. I still can't believe it, Jake said, shaking his head. Mr. Harvey, do you understand what you've done? Martinez's son will meet his father. Thompson will have his first Christmas with his wife. Williams will see snow for the first time in 2 years. We're not done, Steve announced. Bob, you mentioned the shop. You've been running it alone? Bob nodded. Had to let my other mechanic go during COVID. Been just me since then. Jake, you planning to help your dad when you're at Wright-Patterson? Every weekend I can. Steve smiled. Our automotive sponsor wants to fully outfit your shop with new equipment. Lifts, diagnostic computers, tools, everything. They want Mitchell & Son Auto Repair to be the best equipped shop in Columbus. Bob's legs actually gave out this time. Tom and Jake caught him, lowering him to a sitting position on the stage. Mr. Harvey, Bob managed, that's $100,000 worth of equipment. $150,000, Steve corrected. They're also providing a scholarship fund for you to hire and train veterans who want to learn the trade. Bob was sobbing now, completely overwhelmed. Jake knelt beside his father, holding him. Dad, Jake said, Mitchell & Son. Just like we always dreamed. But it was just a dream, Bob protested weakly. Not anymore, Jake said firmly. Not anymore, Dad. As they helped Bob back to his feet, Steve noticed something on Jake's uniform. Jake, that ribbon, is that new? Jake looked down, almost embarrassed. Yes, sir. The Air Force Commendation Medal, for the aircraft save. And the others? Jake rattled them off modestly. Air Force Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Air Force Expeditionary Service Ribbon, 4 deployments worth, Bob added with pride. 4 deployments, 3 to combat zones, and he came home safe every time. By the grace of God and the prayers of my parents, Jake said, looking at his mother. Diane spoke up for the first time in a while. Every night, every single night, I prayed for you. I know, Mom. I felt them. There were times. There were close calls I can't talk about. But I felt those prayers. The audience was completely invested now, many of them wiping away tears. Several veterans in the audience had stood at attention when Jake had entered, and they remained standing. Steve noticed them. We've got veterans in the audience today. Would you all please stand? About a dozen men and women stood up, representing different branches and different eras of service. This young man represents all of you, Steve said. The sacrifice, the service, the families left behind, and the homecomings that make it worthwhile. One elderly veteran, wearing a Korea War veteran cap, called out, "Welcome home, airmen." Jake snapped to attention and saluted. "Thank you, sir." The veteran saluted back, and the entire studio erupted in applause. As the formal taping wrapped up, Steve had one more announcement. You know what? We're going to make this an annual tradition. Every Veterans Day week, Family Feud is going to do a military family reunion show. We're going to bring families together and remind America that supporting our troops means supporting their families too. Bob spoke up, his voice stronger now. Mr. Harvey, what you've done today. My son is home. My boy is home. How do we ever thank you for that? You don't, Steve said firmly. This is America saying thank you. To Jake for his service. To you and Diane for raising him. To all the Mitchells and all the military families who sacrifice so we can be free. As the cameras finally stopped rolling, the families stayed on stage, nobody wanting the moment to end. Jake was surrounded by his family, but he kept one arm firmly around his father's shoulders. Dad, Jake said quietly. "I need to tell you something." "What's that, son?" "That heart attack you had. I need you to know I almost did come home. Papers were drawn up and everything. Compassionate reassignment. But Ashley told me you were stable, and she said you'd never forgive me if I abandoned my post." Bob looked at his son with fierce love. She was right. "But Jake, knowing you wanted to, that means everything." "There's more," Jake continued. "The Mustang. I know you haven't started it, but have you at least been maintaining it?" Bob looked embarrassed. "I may have gone out there every Sunday and turned the engine over by hand, checked the fluids, kept the battery charged." Jake laughed, really laughed, for the first time. "I knew it. I knew you couldn't leave it completely alone. It's our car," Bob said simply. "When we start it for real, we're going to do it together." "This weekend," Jake promised. "This weekend, we fire her up and take her for the drive we've been planning since I was 15. Steve approached them one more time. "Jake, what's your first meal request when you get home?" Jake grinned. "Mom's pot roast. But honestly, Mr. Harvey, I'd eat MREs if it meant eating them at home." "Don't give me ideas," Diane laughed. "Though after 16 months of military food, you deserve every home-cooked meal I can make." "Mom's going to cook everything," Ashley predicted. "The kitchen's going to look like Thanksgiving for a month." "Speaking of Thanksgiving," Jake said, "that's next week. I'll actually be home for Thanksgiving. First one in 4 years," Bob added, his voice thick with emotion. As the families finally began to leave the stage, various audience members approached Jake, shaking his hand, thanking him for his service. One young boy, maybe 10 years old, approached shyly with his mother. "My dad's deployed too," the boy said quietly. "Air Force, like you." Jake immediately dropped to one knee to be at the boy's eye level. "Yeah? What does he do?" "He fixes helicopters," the boy said proudly. "That's important work," Jake said seriously. "Those helicopters save lives. Your dad's a hero." "When will he come home?" the boy asked. Jake looked at the boy's mother, who mouthed, 3 more months. "Soon," Jake told the boy. "And when he does, he's going to be so proud of how you've been taking care of your mom. You're being brave too. You know that?" The boy nodded, standing a little taller. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a challenge coin. "This is from my squadron. You give this to your dad when he comes home. Tell him it's from Master Sergeant Mitchell, and that his brothers in arms are proud of him." The boy clutched the coin like it was gold, and his mother wiped away tears, mouthing thank you to Jake. As the Mitchell family finally made their way off stage, Bob stopped and turned back to look at the Family Feud set one more time. "This place," he said quietly, "this place gave me my son back." "No, Dad," Jake corrected gently. "The Air Force gave you your son back. This place just made it unforgettable." 3 days later, on Saturday morning, Bob and Jake stood in the garage, looking at the covered Mustang. The rest of the family had gathered Diane, Ashley, Tom, Jennifer, and even some neighbors who had heard Jake was home. "Ready?" Jake asked his father. "I've been ready for 16 months, Bob replied. Together, they pulled off the tarp, revealing the pristine 1967 Mustang Fastback they'd rebuilt together. It was painted Air Force Blue, Jake's choice, when he was 15. "She's beautiful, Dad. Even better than I remembered." "She's been waiting," Bob said, "just like us." They climbed in, Bob in the driver's seat, Jake riding shotgun, their traditional positions from when Jake was young. "Together?" Bob asked, his hand on the key. "Together," Jake confirmed, putting his hand over his father's. They turned the key, and the engine roared to life on the first try, strong and smooth, just like they'd built it to be. "Listen to that," Jake said, closing his eyes. "That's the sound of home." "No, son," Bob corrected, pulling his boy close with one arm. "You're the sound of home. The car's just a bonus." They drove for hours that day, through Columbus and beyond, father and son, catching up on 16 months of missed conversations. They talked about everything and nothing the shop. Jake's experiences he could share, plans for the future, memories of the past. When they finally pulled back into the driveway, the whole family was waiting on the porch with a banner that read, "Welcome home, Jake." "How was it?" Diane called out. Jake looked at his father, then at his family, then at the home he'd missed for so long. "Perfect," he said simply. "Absolutely perfect." The episode aired 2 weeks later, on December 4th, just in time for the holiday season. It became the most watched episode in Family Feud history, surpassing even Steve Harvey's most viral moments. The hashtag number Dad Turnaround trended globally for days. But more importantly, it inspired a movement. Military families from around the world